Hello and welcome to our third episode of Stucratic podcast. Tune in when life goes out of tune. I'm your host, Sampada Pachori, director at IUC Foundation, and today we are going to talk about
Welcome to Stucratic FM. In today's episode, what to expect from Masters Abroad. Our guests for today are Bhanu Pandey, Poornaditya Mishra, Juhi Yeturu, and Apoorv Terwadkar. Let's begin.
what to expect after we have secured admission to masters outside India. Today's three guests are Poornaditya Mishra, who is an AI enthusiast and out of the box thinker. He recently completed his master's in AI from University of Michigan and is currently working as an AI researcher at Miracle Labs. Our second guest, Juhi, is a first-year master in management student at ESSEC Business School, and she's doing the ESSEC LVMH chair. Based in Paris, she is a University Innovation Fellow from Stanford's D School and a Women at Dior mentee. A computer science engineer with a dual focus on strategy and luxury, she's an upcoming intern at Christian Dior Couture. Our third guest today is Bhanu Pandey, who completed his master's in electrical and computer engineering from Georgia Tech, graduating in 2019, and then worked as analog design engineer for Texas Instruments for 4.5 years. Apoorv is the episode lead, and he's the key person behind the series. He's BTech Mechanical graduate from 2022 and currently product marketing and operations head in a UAE-based startup. Been learning Japanese for the past 1 year and planning to go to MBA in Japan next year. Friends, so pursuing higher education in foreign universities is not the same thing as traveling to Switzerland for vacation with a family. For quite a few of us, it is also our first international travel, and it comes with a lot of anxiety surrounding language and cultural barriers, lifestyle, people behavior, food, commute, managing finances, legal paperwork, house hunting, interpersonal relations with two roommates, classmates, project teammates, etc. Expectations from faculty, which could be vastly different from the teachers and teaching styles we are so habitual of in our own country. So while this is a lot of matter to cover in a single episode, but we shall try to do our best to bring you varying perspectives from our speakers in the next 45 minutes. And I'm going to begin my first question with Juhi. And my question to Juhi is basically on the differences in learning expectations that she has encountered while in France compared to when she was in India during her graduation. Juhi?
Thanks for having me today, ma'am. Well, I'd spent my entire childhood outside of India. So, engineering was the first time I spent 4 years consecutively back in India. Outside, I would say people are more focused towards practicality as opposed to theory. In India, they really focus on your foundations. So many times you end up learning things that might be quite outdated, I feel. And the way that they say is if your foundation is not strong enough, then how can you proceed? But compared to my education here in France, where we are working more on a case study basis, where you have to form your own opinions based on the material you're consuming. On the exam, you're not replicating what your textbooks say. Instead, you want to do an application of the theories that you learn with real life issues. I would say the Indian system is more about whether you're able to replicate what they want to tell you, a more technical aspect, as compared to outside, where they prefer you knowing how to implement your learnings.
Well, I think I would like to hear the same from Bhanu. Uh, what would you say? And when you are covering this, I would want you to cover the time when you went from India to China and then again back to US. How did you see the varying learning expectations in each of these experiences?
I would say as far as the learning expectation go, India to China and China to US was not that big of a difference because the professors who were teaching me in China were actually Georgia Tech professors from US who traveled to China. So they were the same kind of people. The only thing is like based on the like the rules of the course and the countries and everything with the visa laws and everything. In China, the workload was less compared to what it was in the US, because in the US I have to be enrolled in 4 subjects per semester. China it could be 3, so that may make a big difference, I would say. And in China, because of some like reasons, like the variety was not so much to choose from, but in US we had like we can like cherry pick the best of the best subjects. So I chose like 4 tough subjects in one semester, so it was very hectic as compared to the one in China. So the and then the second thing, like the Juhi pointed out, it was more practical oriented, unlike India where you can just copy paste assignment and that's like 50% of your marks, and then the 50% of your is in your finals. Like in the undergrad in India and any common college, this is not the case in the US. I mean, they do have a large percentage on assignments and everything, but then all those assignments you have to do it yourself. And while you do the assignments, you actually learn what is being taught to you, you apply what is being taught to you, and the finals is only like 20 or 30% of the 100% score. So it's not like everything is a final, unlike India. That's not the case in the US. Uh, and it's more about like learning and applying what you have learned.
Mhm. Thank you, Bhanu.
So,
Poornaditya?
Yes, Sam. So I'd like to follow up on what Bhanu said, that we get to cherry pick our subjects, which is something I really love about the education system that we have over here. In India, we have fixed subjects that in first semester you have to study this thing, in second semester you have to study this thing, and so on. Um, in one way, it is good that yes, it builds your foundation, but you're also pretty much forced to study a lot of things which you might never use in your life. On the contrary, over here we have the option to pick whichever subject we want. So if I want to major in AI, even in AI we have multiple domains. I can either go into computer vision, I can go into content generation, or I can just stick to natural language processing. I can pick whichever subject I feel would be useful in the domain that I am interested in, or in the domain that I want to build my career in. So that gave me a lot of freedom with which I could like mix and match and try out different things. Also, I had the option that I could audit any class I want. So I could take like 2 weeks of quote unquote trial classes and see how the professor is teaching, what the syllabus is, and what's the flow of class. Based on that, I can pick whichever professor I prefer, whichever mode of teaching I prefer. I could take either hybrid classes or totally in person. So that has been really amazing. And also, as Bhanu mentioned, that finals carry only 30%, 20% weightage, which is yet another amazing part. Um, Almost all the subjects we are given lots of projects, assignments. Some professors even ask us to do technical paper reviews, which allow us to stay up to date with whatever is happening in the world right now. Sometimes we get open-ended projects that search the domain, read papers, whichever is the latest model you find, build something on that, or try to recreate the experiment. So that was a major change of experience I found between India and US.
To add on to Banu and Poornaditya's points, I also realized that the team assessments have a lot more weightage as compared to India. For instance, for us, our fourth year's major project was where everyone had to contribute to a certain extent. But here, that's the case for almost every subject. Like we have the theory part, individual assignments, but also group assignments, where they also ask us to evaluate our peers on everyone's contribution. So you are made to take initiative in order to get a better score. On top of that, we do have an access to a repertoire of live cases where we get to work directly with companies. Probably because mine is a business school right now as opposed to a technical school. That could be one reason why this is applicable for us right now. The third thing is they really value international exposure. For us, regardless of where we're coming from, it's mandatory to at least report 6 months of international exposure. So for French students, they need to take 6 months off to either work or to study abroad. For me, it's validated since I am an international student. So yeah.
Thank you. So this leads me to two sub questions, and I'm going to put them both across, and I will ask you to take them one by one. Since we are talking of learning, we cannot not talk about assessment. So while I do follow how the learning process is differently laid out for three of you, is there anything on assessment side which you would want to fill in to complete this perspective? My other question would be, if you were aware of how this was going to be when you joined Masters outside, is there anything you would have done differently while you were still doing your undergraduate degree program in India that you might want to tell to your juniors currently? And I'll invite Juhi maybe to begin first, followed by Poornaditya, followed by Bhanu to answer both these questions, please.
Yes, thank you, ma'am. So I would say the number one thing that was very different for assessments is the system of essays. Um, in India, when I was doing my engineering, sure, we did our little code samples or we submitted our codes, but we never had to submit it in an essay format where we had to cite references from particular articles and say, this is where I'm drawing my conclusions from, this is where I'm getting my information from. To the point that in the very beginning, one of my course grades actually got affected because I didn't know how to do proper citations, and I had to go back to the professor to request an extra work on top of it to improve my grade. So when you're in India, maybe also check a bit on different writing styles, academic writing, how to do proper citations, how to really find articles, scholarly articles, your references. Try to be very holistic with where you're sourcing your information. Your mic is on mute, ma'am.
Thank you, Juhi. Poornaditya?
Yes, Sam. So, as Juhi mentioned, there's a major difference in the writing styles. In India, if you're ever asked to write a report on any project that you have built, then that report has to go at least 50 pages because you are graded on how much you can write rather than what you can write. At least that is true for most of the universities. There might be some professors who can grade you on what you write, but let's be honest. In India, we are forced to write a lot. That is totally not the case over here. When we are given any assignment, it has to be to the point. In my case, almost all my subjects are very technical. So during the lectures, professors would discuss an algorithm or a methodology or a concept. And the assignment would be that, okay, so now you know this concept, you know your Python, code it, write a code for it. And you're also graded for your efforts and initiative. Let's say I am given an NLP project and I'm not that skilled in Python that I can code it on my own. In that case, I can request the professor that please can you give me some guidance, or I can just try out something. If not, I can at least show him the approach, the algorithm, or the pseudocode. So there are a lot of things that can actually help your assessment, and that is something I really like. Also, a very interesting part is that almost all the subjects they have the TAs or the graders. TAs are basically teaching assistants, and almost always they are students. So you get to see both the aspects. You can take the course. Later, you can become a grader as well to get a better understanding of how the grading system works and how the grades are actually given. So that really helps you a lot because you get a lot of perspective on how things are done. And I'll also quickly answer the second question that ma'am had put in. Like, if you knew this, what changes would you do during a bachelor's? Um, So in that case, I was actually pretty fortunate to be able to have the opportunity to work on quite a few projects, which gave me a lot of practical exposure, especially during my final years of engineering. I had an actual internship where I worked with the company to build a robotic system. Even in my seventh semester, I built a humanoid, which gave me a lot of practical experience. And it also gave me a confidence in my skills that if I know a concept, I can write a code for it. So my suggestion would be that try to build as many projects as you can. Try to work in teams. And when I say try to work in teams, I do not mean like you grab four people just to make teams with them throughout your entire life. Keep changing your teams because when you go to your masters, all your friends will be taking different courses. It's not possible that everybody has the same course for the entire journey because everybody has their own journey. So you'll be put into different teams. Sometimes you'll have the freedom to pick teams. Sometimes you'll be put into the teams. So you'll have to have an open mind and learn team building.
Well, that captures the point on team building, but let us hear from Bhanu.
All right. So coming to the point, like what would have I done differently, or what would I have done? What would I suggest for the undergrad people to do? Right. So I would say because the biggest difference between India and outside countries, like the way of thinking, the mindset, and that's something. I mean, I knew this thing back when even when I was in India, I knew this thing that there's a difference, but I didn't know what was the difference exactly. No one was there to tell me, hey, this is exactly the difference. Everyone says it's more practical there, it's less practical in India, but exactly what's the difference? No one tells me that. So I would say and also there's more to it. Like for every individual, the way of thinking is like programmed into them because they spent, like, for example, 20 years in India growing up. So there's a way of thinking that is being programmed into that. So that has to be deprogrammed, and a new programming has to be fed in, which is not easy. So I would say the best thing you can do is do some kind of research project, something in which you have to do some research. Because when you're doing independent research, then you have to think, and the way you'll be thinking and doing, no one's going to tell you what you do. It's all on you. So that way, when you do that thing, it actually gives you a chance to evaluate yourself the way you think as an individual, and also give you a chance to reprogram your mind. So I did few research projects, and I would recommend the same. And then if someone is more specific in analog or something, I would suggest the best you can do is maybe uh, go through some Razavi videos on YouTube for learning. It's going to help you later on in your career. But to answer your question, I would say do some kind of research project in which you have to think and research, and you get a chance to evaluate how you think and who are you.
Thank you. So both of you have touched on one point that I would like to further elaborate upon. Poornaditya touched the point on the team, and you picked up the point on research. So my immediate question to Bhanu, you would be, do you think having a bit of an industry experience prior to joining masters overseas changes anything or makes the experience easier or better?
To an extent, yes. It will depend very much on what kind of job you had before the masters and what kind of job you have after the masters, and if there are similarities, then yeah, it's gonna help. Yes, for example, like I was working in Texas Instruments now. If I would have worked in Texas Instrument in India, I'm not saying it's gonna be I would have a huge advantage or anything, but at least there was few things, few basic things for like the tools and stuff that are being taught in the industry and not in the college, not even in Georgia Tech, that I would have known because I was already working in the industry. So there are a few advantages, yes, but not like a huge advantage because in India the way things work and in US the way things work in industry, things are somewhat different. The extent to which thing works are also different. So yeah,
Okay,
advantage, but not like a big huge advantage. Yes.
right. So let me come to the point on the teams and also the interpersonal behavior and associated complexity due to the cultural diversity in various cases. Uh, and I'm also going to briefly touch upon the language issue. So if you're moving from India to an English-speaking country, language may not be a big deal. But particularly if it is a country where the main language is a non-English, then that adds another layer of complexity. So I know I'm mixing up 3 points here. My point number one is, how do you work in teams when you have a programming done differently in India, as Bhanu put it, as compared to people who are coming from different countries in one foreign university? How do you battle or overcome those differences in their language, in their behavior, in their cultural perceptions when you're working in teams. And I'm referring to teams in college during your project work or assignments. And I would like to call upon Poornaditya first to throw light on this, followed by Juhi and followed by Bhanu, if that's okay.
Yes, sir. So to start things, I'll follow with what Bhanu said that in India we are programmed to think in a certain way, which is not always the best idea when you're moving abroad, and that changes a lot of things because especially with work, there are projects and your studies. In India, you're just learning something and you are just on how well you can like, just reiterate whatever was taught. Here, you are supposed to have your individual thinking. Along with that, you're supposed to be an individual contributor while also being a team player. So when you're in a team, it's not that one person will do everything and others can just sit around and that, yeah, cool. Um, Even if you are the one doing everything, in that case, you have to be the one pushing everybody. You have to be the leader in that case. And teachers are pretty, I'll say, pretty efficient at judging what is your individual contribution because as mentioned by Juhi earlier, we have peer reviews and also we'll have multiple reviews throughout the entire semester where we are judged based on the progress of our project. During this time, we are actually supposed to give a brief overview of what we have worked on, what we are working on, what have we learned, and what has been the individual contribution of each and every member. So that really forces you to pull your own weight, show your efforts, and actually contribute something to the team. When it comes to collaborating with people from different countries, in that case, that is actually a very enriching experience because you see how people think. Um, there is a lot of difference when it comes to working with people with different countries. Someone from India will have a different state of mind. Someone from who came from European countries, they have a different way of working. Similarly, someone who has been always entirely born and brought up in US, they have a totally different way of working and thinking. So you cannot just stay like, okay, no, this is the right way. There is no right way when it comes to working with others. Everybody brings a different perspective, everybody brings a different style. So you have to be very flexible to be able to adapt to whatever happens and however your team works, which becomes very true when you start working outside because then it's a totally different story. You have a team you're working with, you're reporting to somebody who might not be the same country, who might be someone else entirely. You'll be working with multiple clients, you'll be working with clients who might be offshore. In US, sometimes we work with clients who are from Germany or sometimes from Japan as well. So that completely changes how you work, how you think. So you have to be very adaptable to be able to work on in a situation like this.
Mhm.
I'd say Aditya covered almost all points, but I can add a few as well. Um, I'd say the biggest tools in your toolbox when you're working with a team with multiple cultures is having lots of empathy, being open minded, and putting communication as your first step forward, right? Because, well, the reason that universities do put such a big emphasis on gaining international exposure during your time at university is to make your mind more adaptable to accepting differences. I'd say, as Indians, we're already used to working with a diversity of cultures, so that is a strong point for us. But at the same time, because we are quite welcoming, we might find other cultures a bit more cold or a bit more open. That does not mean they're wrong. That does not mean that they're right. It just means that they've had different life experiences and different approaches to how they tackle a problem or a solution, anything good or anything bad. So, the best way to solve it, be very open with your team. Communicate. If you have any issues, don't keep it hidden down, because some people they're very direct, especially when they're giving positive or negative feedback, but others tend to be very subtle about it. They might say, oh, just a little bit, but they mean they don't like the idea. Or they might say, oh, maybe if we can do this. They really want to push forward their idea, but they're more subtle about it. Other times it feels very harsh, like you're doing good, and then this person says, oh no, this idea is horrible, our project will fail. They're just being very direct with their feedback. It doesn't mean they hate you. They're just speaking about the project. So don't get hurt. Don't mix your professional and your personal lives together. And when these things happen, do not wait for the wound to fester. Just sit down, have a communication basis, set a bunch of rules. Look, if anything happens, approach me directly. As long as you do that, you're good. In fact, having a multicultural team enhances the quality of your project. It gives you more perspectives, it gives you more a rich repertoire of life experiences that can be drawn from everybody. So take it as a strength, not a weakness.
Uh, all right. Can I go?
Yeah,
Can I go
Bhanu.
ahead?
Yeah.
All right. So, I mean, you both of you covered really good points that you have to be adaptable and all those things. And Joey covered really good point that people from different culture are different. And like you said, you have to be just multiculturally adaptable and everything. And my experience, like I would add like three more points, I would say, on top of everything that has already been said. Like my experience so far, the three things I noticed, like when I was working with Europeans, they are straight to the point. But then you have when you're talking to them, just be very mindful of their privacy and their boundaries. Don't ask anything that you think is personal to them or might be encroaching on their boundaries. Or if you expect them to work beyond 5 o'clock, like if it's basically if you're talking to someone in Germany, don't expect them to stay 1 minute after 5 o'clock. So those kind of stuff. And then for Americans, I would say like mostly white Americans that I've worked with, just be mindful of like their boundaries, and also many of them will never speak directly to you. They will not speak their mind directly to you. You have to read in between the lines. So that's something I was still working on, but that's a kind of skill. That's how American people are, unfortunately. But yeah, I learned this about with time. And the third thing, which is more like a practically, I would have learned what I've learned in life. So there is something called 80-20 principle. It's not something anyone wants, but that's how things end up working anyway. In any team, in any organization, in any team project, 20% of the people do 80% of the work. So you can try to say no, that's not true, and all that, but in the end, that's how it happens. Everywhere in the world, it's a universal law. You can't escape it. That's it.
I would like three of you to also highlight on the language issues. Particularly, I think Juhi has a multi-country experience. I'm not so sure how Poornaditya struggled or did not struggle, because he was literally moving from one English speaking to another English speaking situation. And in your case, Bhanu, I know you had a stint at China, which is again, it's a different conversation language. But if most people around you were English speaking, then it's still life is easy. And since we're talking of language, I know Apoorv has been working on Japanese and preparing to go to Japan. So, how do you overcome so many challenges posed when you're trying to be working in a team where you have to understand what's there in their mind, what they actually imply or mean, what is their cultural bias, and then, of course, to add to it the language differences on top of it, where you're not generally translating something because the form of speech is not always about using a Google translator. There's a lot which is spoken outside of translation. So, can I have maybe Juhi first, and then Apoorv, and then Bhanu and Poornaditya in this order?
Yes, ma'am, definitely. This is quite surprising, but I learned English quite late. It's my seventh language. It's just that messed up. But I'd say I was a bit fortunate because when children are young, they're like sponges, right? They, absorb information really quickly. So maybe growing up, because I had to go to different places, I am a bit more at ease to adapting to new languages. But there is a reason for this. Usually, as an adult, especially if you're going to a country where you have to pick up a new language, you are a bit embarrassed. You think, what if I don't speak with the right pronunciation or with the wrong grammar? What if they judge me? And as children, you don't have that fear. As children, you just want to get your communication across. Even if you use the wrong vocabulary, wrong sentence structure, as long as what you're implying goes through, you're good. But as adults, we get this added, shame. What if I speak something wrong? What if they laugh at me? But Thing is, that's how everyone learns. You have to trip a few times in order to learn how to walk and then how to run. So for me, language has been a stage where I just attack it directly. I don't go for the traditional, let me sit down with a book, pen, and paper and learn it step by step. The best way to do it is to just go out, start speaking. Find the natives, start speaking. If you make mistakes, it's okay, they will correct you. But if you don't make mistakes, you'll never grow. On the other hand, when I am working with teams with multiple languages, I'd say I'm a bit fortunate in the sense in most universities in US and Europe, this is a scenario. 30% of them will be Indian, the students, 30% will be Chinese, and 40% are everyone else. And I guess that works out population wise as well. We got so many Indians and Chinese, like, where do they go? But because I speak Mandarin, automatically 60% of the team they connect with me automatically. The other 40%, I'd say it's not just a difference in the way they speak, but also their body language. For instance, I remember even within English, I remember when I moved from Saudi to India for my undergraduation, I was immediately met with, oh, you're arrogant. Oh, you're showing an attitude. I'm like, no, when I don't know something, I'm just trying to clarify. They're like, oh, but you're shrugging. Because it is something so automatic and natural for me that if I don't know something, you just shrug your shoulders to say no. But this was taken as bad body language. And these are the like in between the line social cues that you often miss out, even with countries or you'd say cities or districts with different cultures. So even in English to English, there could be mistranslations. But you're not the only one in this team who's working with new people. Everyone else also knows that it's a mixture of cultures. So they tend to be a bit more open minded, where you can just sit down and you can cross check with about their intentions. If you think someone is rolling their eyes at you when they're speaking, it might be just thinking something inside their minds. Maybe they're just thinking over something, and you see that as them being disrespectful towards your opinions. But no, the moment you see something like that, just clarify with them. Don't carry it inside. And end of the day, if you have a miscommunication that day, if you feel something uncomfortable, clarify it within the same day. Don't take it to the next. Yes, ma'am.
Brilliantly answered.
Yes, so actually, that's a really important aspect that Juhi covered, which is the cultural implications of, or rather, the cultural subtitles in a certain sense of the language. Because uh, I obviously don't have the real life experience that the rest of the people on the panel have, but I have been learning, and fortunately, my sensei, the person who's teaching me, she has been to Japan. She is also an advanced teacher, so she's been giving us this education on how to use the cultural aspect to, because any language comes from a particular region, and the region would obviously to a certain extent incorporate certain aspects of that region's culture into the language because they're using it for daily communication. So that aspect is very, very important, and I think that that point that Juhi mentioned is very important. As for the ease of understanding a language aspect. Uh, Personally, what I've found, even when I was learning English, as well as like in my case, I had this reversed issue where, thanks to my dad, I lived outside for quite a while in South Africa. So, effectively, my first language to a certain degree was English. I learned English as the primary communication medium. I spoke to English friends, and that kind of structured my brain in a way to think in English. Like even now, even though my mother tongue is Marathi, I still think in English and then I would speak in Marathi. And that translation that happens in the head, over time, I've gotten more and more comfortable in my own mother tongue. But that aspect is very important. So the point that actually Bhanu mentioned and Poornaditya also mentioned about programming, that plays a very key aspect. So what's helped me in this particular situation is that I used the media that I was consuming as a way to imbibe all of the information. So for example, when I was learning English as a child, I would watch tons and tons of Winnie the Pooh. I used to listen to the audiobooks. I was a huge fan of Ben 10. Ben 10 helped me kind of understand the language. When I came back to India, even then, even though Tata Sky had the Hindi dub option, I used to watch in English. Same happened when I was learning Marathi, where I chose to listen to Marathi songs, watch Marathi movies, like proper Marathi movies, not the movies that are more metro city kind of, where there's a lot of mixture of multiple languages. And that has translated into my learning experience with Japanese as well, because at a certain point in engineering, you do end up watching anime at some point. And that has been the case for me, where I've been watching anime since I was a kid. I just didn't know that one, it's a Japanese thing and it's called anime. And when I started to, look at it as this tool to understand, at least as a stepping stone, because anime as well, like all other media, is informal language. And the Japanese do not speak in informal language. They speak to their friends or their close circle informally, but they do not like informal language, especially if you're talking to somebody who's in your workplace, in your academic places, etc. So understanding that this is a stepping stone, listening or watching. So if somebody is, for example, watching a South Indian movie, and if, let's say, they're learning South Indian languages, whichever Telugu may be, so it's better to watch the movie in Telugu with maybe English, Hindi subtitles, whichever subtitle helps you kind of understand. But hearing the words in the original language actually is a great way, at least for me personally, to get into the zone. So whenever I'm studying, like for example, I have an exam coming up for the language, I will constantly have podcasts in that language blasting into my ears constantly. I might not even be paying attention, but it helps me familiarize with the vocabulary. It helps me familiarize with the cadence. As Juhi mentioned, the pronunciation, obviously not as good as because they literally invented the language, but close enough. And that kind of helps me personally.
Mm-hmm. Poornaditya?
Yes, Sam. So I'll add up to something what Apoorv mentioned, which was amazing, that you can consume media and learn about the culture and languages. But that comes a very big disclaimer that what you see is not what the reality is. As you mentioned, that the way you talk in anime is not the way you actually talk to people. Uh, I cannot emphasize how true that is in America as well. When you watch any American like Netflix shows or anything at all, then you have a consider, oh wow, we do this in America. This is how we talk to people. This is how we interact. And more often than not, I have seen people, especially the people who came after me over here, they were like, okay, we saw in the movies that everybody is just cussing and abusing and using those kind of words, which is not true. You do not talk to anybody like that. Like, nobody does it. And then people actually try to do the same thing that, oh wow, I'm a cool dude. I have seen things. This is what happens in Netflix. They actually end up getting in trouble. So that is something you have to be very careful about when consuming media. And as far as language is concerned, then yes, I was very fortunate that US speaks English. The only difference that I had was there was some slight change in accent and some words, like capsicum, bell peppers. They are the same, but for Americans, it's not the same. If you like go to a shop and ask, "Can I have some capsicum?" They're like completely blank. They don't know what it is. Bell peppers is the word. Same goes with brinjal and eggplants. Things are very different. So that is something you pick up with experience. And as Juhi mentioned, that when you are kids, you're not afraid of making mistakes. When you're adult, you're afraid of making mistakes. That is, yes, a very big hindrance, I would say. Do not be afraid to make mistakes. You will make mistakes. And when you talk to the natives, you'll realize that, oh, even they make mistakes. Like when I speak to Americans, okay, I won't say my grammar is the best, but I won't say that their grammar is the best either. They too make mistakes. It's natural. And that's how you'll learn.
Bhanu?
All right. So there are two major aspects here. Like when you're talking about like speaking a different language and communicating well. There are two different aspects. One is communicating with your peers in your, let's say, work office or in your college. That's one thing. If you're doing just that, then all you need to do is be professional and talk their language, and you just have to learn the accent with time and everything. That part is easy, I would say. The second aspect is if you're actually assimilating with the real people outside the college or outside the in the real world, it's a whole different story there. So let's not talk about that right now. Coming back to college, so if you're keeping your conversation professional, all you need to do is learn English, which you already do because you have to do the GRE exam. And both of you, the speakers before me, covered really good points. I did the same mistake of learning everything through Netflix, trying to learn everything through Netflix once I came to US. And my wife still says that I do have like a Californian Valley Girl accent in my accent right now. Uh, he thinks that. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I just kind of when I came to US, I kind of like pick up the accent from the first people I met, and that happens to be some Californian girl or whatever, and I didn't even realize it. So now I do have a touch of Californian accent in my accent now, and I don't even realize it. So yeah. So yeah, just try to like learn from the locals and try to copy their accent, but don't go too deep with it. That's all I have to say.
Um, Fun facts about the cultures. Did you know that everyone has a different personality based on the language that they're speaking in?
No.
Yes. In fact, I tested it out. The MBTI test, my friend's tutor had me take it in French other than English, and it was the exact opposite. Like in English, I was much more extroverted. I was ENFP. But when I went French, I was judgmental. I was ISTJ, and turns out that I really am very introverted and I'm very calm. But this is because French is a new language for me. So obviously, when I'm trying to speak or when I'm trying to give an opinion, I need to think for a bit before I give an answer out. So the whole Valley Girl accent thing, it's normal. Like when you go to a new place, depending on who you're speaking with, the way you speak, you sort of have a chameleon effect where you pick up how the other people are speaking over time. So it's completely normal and it's a fun thing to observe within yourself as well.
I would like to add maybe one more point here. So, like in the beginning, when you came to, for example, US or somewhere, and if you try to speak English, and obviously there's the accent difference, and you're trying to fill the gap. So sometimes you're gonna pronounce a word really bad, and you'll feel bad about yourself, or the people may laugh at you. It's very possible it can happen. And in the beginning, I used to do feel that difference, but then once I saw the European people try to speak English, and I realized how bad they are failing, how miserably they are failing, I feel like Indians are doing much better job in comparison. So it's okay. We'll learn with time.
I can't help but narrate a few instances. So for briefly, I'm going to turn into a non-host role. Um, so there are two, three things since we're talking of language, and I had an experience in Italy. I had an experience in US also. So this one is when I was taking my first job in US, and when we have something that we need to clarify, we say, "I have a doubt." That's a very commonly British way of asking for clarification. And it was my HR head, and I said, "I have a doubt." And she felt I had a doubt about joining the company because it was my first day. I was signing papers, I was getting inducted, and she felt that I had a doubt about actually onboarding. And maybe I made a wrong decision and maybe I should not join. And but then I had to clarify. No, so she said, "What are you thinking to, to not join?" I said, "No, I didn't say that." uh, so then when she understood that this is a cultural difference, she said, "Oh, in this case you say you have a question, you don't say you have a doubt, you say you have a question." So that was one of the things I learned. I had another small experience several years down the line. This was my another nth trip to US. This time it was with my family, meaning with my children. And I had taken my daughter to the daycare, and I was getting her admitted into daycare. She was just not even 2 years old. And So we were in the process of shifting from one of the apartments to another apartment, and we were filling up our apartment address. So the caretaker at the daycare, I just tell her that we are moving, and she's like, "Oh, so you're going back to India?" I said, "No, no, 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 no. We are just moving. I'm just moving from one apartment to another." Then she said, "Moving here is seen as relocation. You just say that you are shifting from one home to another." So, these are little things, very little things. And of course, in India, we are hugely influenced by the British English. So, most of our vocabulary and mannerism is inherited through the British English that we have learned. And especially me talking about, when I was growing up in 70s and 80s, I probably, the post-independence English influence that I carry, where there were no media influencing me, of course. So yeah, I couldn't help but share these things. There's one more thing I might want to share. So when we have to say three, we typically do this. That's what Indians do. And when I did that for the first time, I'm not going to tell you why, but people laughed at me. And then I was told, you do this, you don't do this. And this is considered really ugly, really bad. And I won't tell you why and what. Go figure. If Juhi understood, she's laughing. So all those watching the podcast may want to figure out what this is. So coming back to the question, so I think we've covered plenty on the culture and the language stuff. I know we have two important points remaining. Apoorv, yes, you have a finger raised.
Yes, I actually wanted to ask Juhi to clarify a point. So she mentioned that languages can influence your personality in a certain sense. She mentioned ISTG and ECPF or something. Could you please mention what that is?
Oh, yeah, the MBTI test, 16 personalities, Myers-Briggs. So I won't say this can be the basis to judging your entire personality, but it is something that's helped me evaluate where I am in life ever since I was 15 years old. So once a year or so, when I feel like I'm in a major life change crossroads, I just do it as an evaluation to check whether my decision making, am I making it under all normal circumstances, are a bit more stressed. So according to this, there's 16 different types of personalities across the world. Of course, there can be changes, but if you take that small test and for example, I'm an ENFP, and that's been the case since 2015. So whenever I'm in a crossroads and I'm a bit unsure about what I want to do, one thing I do is I go through the personality traits, check, 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 check. And another thing I would do is what are some career options that are good for ENFP? Find other people who might have a similar personality to myself and check what their career paths have been. Doesn't mean I need to replicate it. It's not like they can show me the road. They can't show me the whole map. They just show the road that they took. And if I want to, I have a bit of a guidance like, yeah, this is a person who wants to be involved in multiple stuff. They don't want a monotonous life. Okay, that's what I'm looking for as well. Okay, so maybe this is a career I might want to go for. It's a bit scientific, but there's also other things called enneagrams and stuff, but a bit rooted, I would say, in behavioral psychology.
Interesting. So, in a certain sense, it's like a starting point for you to kind of build up upon in understanding
Exactly.
yourself. It's like when people use ChatGPT, you don't use it as the final result. You use it as the starting point upon which you add yourself. Interesting.
Exactly. Or like the whole case of coin flips, like if you have a choice between 50-50, the best bet is take a coin and flip the coin. If you're happy with the result, that means deep down you wanted to go for it. But if you feel regretful, that means you wanted to go for the other choice. So in the end, it's just a means for you to solidify what you're looking for deep down as a way of assurance, as opposed to the whole means by which you take your decisions.
Very well said. Right. So we have two important points yet to cover on this podcast. One is related to the management of finances, because we are no longer with our parents who are managing our wallets. We have to take control of our money, whether it's a scholarship or the money that we bring back from India, the parents' hard earned money as our way to spend. Finance is a key factor which also determines whether we go for a degree and where we go for a degree, which degree program, and then, of course, which city or country do we choose. So we cannot ignore finances. And then there's another key point which is related to the immigration rules and a lot of legal paperwork. Since they're both important points, instead of putting them as two separate questions, I'm going to again merge them into one element each, asking three of you to, no, four of you to cover on that if possible. And so tell us about how did you learn to manage your finances and stay frugal? Because being frugal is key. Any tips that you might want to give to the juniors in terms of staying frugal or in terms of staying managing your finances, opening your bank account, plus the aspect of immigration challenges, if you could also throw light on that. And may I request to start with Bhanu on this, followed by Poornaditya and then Juhi. And once Bhanu and Poornaditya and Juhi are done, I would request Apoorv to wrap up the whole thing. And if there is anything we missed out during the episode, any particular perspective or question that was missed out, I would request Apoorv to cover that during his wrap up. Bhanu?
Okay, so coming to finances, I would say it's a very, very subjective question because it depends a lot on where you're coming from, what your background is, what you're doing. It also depends like your time management. Like you may be in a kind of school or a course where you have enough time to maybe do a second job or do something or maybe even cook your own food. It also depends. In my case, like I was like super, super, super busy. Like I had no time to cook. I had no time to do anything else. So luckily I had some enough money and I was like trying to budget myself. Like for example, in my case, when I was in the US, I would get a Papa John's pizza. I use a promo code to get a $10 or $11 pizza near my house, and I try to eat it for like 2.5 days, extra large pizza. So that's how I did my semester in the US. That and few more things like file some sandwiches and stuff. And then of course, like it was like very unhealthy thing to do, so once I graduated and I had some time, I paid the price by doing a lot of physical work and tried to burn all that fat. So I kind of balance things out. But again, it's a very subjective question of how much time you have, how much money you have, where's your money coming from, what's your priority, and how do you exactly manage it. It's very subjective question, honestly. Now, and then coming to the second point of, and then also one more thing. So, because you asked me about the China thing, yeah. So, because I was also in China, and in China it was very difficult for me because Chinese people eat meat a lot. It's not easy for you to communicate there that you don't want to eat meat. And I was vegetarian in India, and it was kind of very hard. Like I was literally starving at some point, but I somehow managed to eat rice and stay alive and just pass through that phase of my life. But yeah, it was tough in terms of food. So that was about food and finances. Now I would say coming to immigration and stuff. So that is literally a nightmare scenario for anyone who's coming to US. They know that, especially now because the immigration is no longer so easy with Trump and all that. Like it's a nightmare really for like anything can go bad. And I've seen people who have been living here for 10 years, they have a house, they have children, and something happens, they lose their job, and next thing they know, they're going to India. So that happens a lot to a lot of people who are well established here. And of course, people who are coming the first time and they might get deported or something bad can happen. They might even fail at the first stage of student visa interview. Anything can happen. There are a lot of challenges here. So that's one thing to be mindful, especially if you're coming to US. In other countries, the laws are much more, I would say, flexible or much more you can play around. So that's one big thing to keep in mind if you're coming, especially to the US, that immigration could be a really, really big challenge.
Poornaditya?
Yes, Sam. So I'll actually continue what Bhanu said about immigration. I'll start with that. That was pretty I'd say a grave topic. Uh, yes, immigration in US is a real nightmare. Your visa interviews are like the forms, they take days to fill. I personally took like 1 week just to fill my visa form because it was super long. And I didn't want to make any mistakes because if you even make a single mistake, your entire form is ruined. Either start from again, and if by chance you have submitted the wrong form, then you are doomed pretty much because there is virtually no way to change anything. And obviously, visa interview preparations, they were a completely different story. Lots of mock interviews. I mean, I spent countless hours practicing my mock interviews. I had mock interviews with my friends who are in US, with my parents, and I even had some people just act like, okay, so you are the consulate officer and you are taking my interview. But the challenges don't stop over there. When you come to US, after that also you have to be very mindful to maintain your visa status. You cannot do anything illegal. If you're on a student visa, then you have to maintain a certain number of credit hours per semester just to maintain your visa status. And there are like so many things that you cannot do, and you have to be very careful. I had a very I'll say fun experience. So I completed my graduation on 27th April. 26th April, I lost my job because I didn't get the employment authorization document, the EAD card, which was delayed by USCIS. So that was fun. That was very a period of uncertainty because of H1B filing and everything going on. My processing kept on getting delayed and delayed. It was like 4 months, even though I had waited for 3 months already. So that was a very tough time, I'll say. And I was lucky to have very supportive colleagues. They ensured that, okay, even though I don't have a job right now, but as soon as I get the document, I can resume working. So that was some reassurance that I really needed. And I got my EAD card just like 2 days ago, and I'll be officially starting my job again from tomorrow. So yeah, that's a nice thing. And now coming to finances, so yes, that is very subjective because some people try to save even like every penny they can. They end up sharing rooms with 3 people, 4 people. I have seen people living in situations where they are just sleeping on the floor, like just beside the kitchen because they didn't have money to get a whole room. I personally want to save money, but that is something I cannot do. Like when I want to relax, that is something very important for me. I want to relax properly. So I went with a solo room, which was obviously more expensive, but it's a balance between peace of mind and saving money. You have to have some peace of mind as well. And yes, as Manu mentioned, some people actually go for illegal jobs because when you're working on a student visa, you cannot take jobs that are not related to your field of study. You cannot like go into Taco Bell and be a server or a cashier. But people still do that, and that is considered as cash jobs because there is no record of you working, so you cannot have any bank statements with it. You have to get paid in cash, and obviously there are no records, so there is like it's not legally binding. They can completely underpay you. They can fire you in just like seconds. That okay, yeah, we don't want you anymore. Get lost, and that comes with its own risk. If you are caught, you are immediately deported. Like you won't even be questioned. If anybody reports you, you are done. So that is something you have to be very careful. I would strongly suggest not doing that as much as possible. There are plenty of opportunities of campus jobs, which are okay. I won't say that they are very high paying, but they pay you enough to fulfill your weekly needs. You can pay your rent off with that. I had campus jobs in my first semester. I was the teaching assistant for one professor. Second semester, I was the teaching assistant for two courses. During my third semester, I became a research assistant. So with every passing semester, my pay pretty much increased. I got more number of hours, and my hourly rate also increased. So that helped me a lot. And one very important point that I would like to highlight is that you have to save money. I mean, that is like super essential. You have to have some funds for a rainy day. Like in my case, I lost the job, so obviously I was not paid a penny for the past 3 weeks. So I needed to have some savings, which helped me a lot. Um, and yes, cooking is obviously a good idea, but it takes a lot of time. So you can go with meal preps. Prepare your meal, keep it for a week. You can easily store stuff in your fridge or freezer or make something in bulk. And buying things from outside might not seem like the best idea, but sometimes you have to value your time over money. Because if you have time, you can work and you can get a higher paying job. So that is something you have to balance the pros and cons of, weigh everything, and make an informed decision.
Mhm. Thank you, Poornaditya. Juhi?
Both of you have covered many good points. Because I'm living in Europe right now, there are a few differences from your experiences. For the first topic, the visa process, it was a bit difficult in the sense most of these papers were in French. So if you mess up over there, it really affects you in the long term. But I did do is I waited for other people to start filling their forms, so I could take guidance from them rather than attacking it blindly. So I just worked in my own pace. But also, our university had an excellent program where they were able to support us if you had any questions whatsoever. So visa, I would say, was a much gentler process, even though it took some time to collect all the documents. The interview was not too harsh. It was rather focused on whether this degree is actually useful for you. Are you just doing it for the sake of doing it, or is this degree valuable for you, and that's why you're coming over here? Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Other than that, for the finance side, I'd say money not spent is money saved. Yes, when people do come here, they first start with the tourist mindset, bam, 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 start spending, and then later they get a bit tensed. But finances is something really highly subjective, as it has been reiterated well before. I'd say start documenting your spendings. um like the whole, how much you're paying for groceries, how much you're paying for rent. For me, I particularly chose that my monthly spendings should be less than my monthly rent, and that's something I try to stick to. But sometimes if it crosses, it's okay, because I will choose for the next time. If I overspend today, next time I want to treat myself, I'll wait for a bit, I'll wait for some time to reward myself. But other than that, it really depends on you, how you plan out for the rest of the year. The jobs part of it, it's not as restrictive as Poornaditya's experience. We can take jobs that are not relevant to our degree. But there are two things to it. One, if it's part time, sure, you can do it. You are a student. Every week, you can do a particular number of hours of part time. If you're doing an internship or an apprenticeship, though, it needs to be approved from the university, because they want to know that you're doing a legit job and not something that's just there for the sake of validating your professional experience. I'd say there are higher taxes in Europe, yes, but that also means it's a bit less strict on you as a student. Until the age of 26, I mentioned this in the previous episode as well. You are treated as a student, and by that means someone who might not be financially stable yet. So there's a lot of support from the government in terms of housing allowances, or if you apply for scholarships, then you can also avail for student grants. And as far as rent goes, there are again options for this. You can choose to live in a residence, you can choose to rent with other people, or you can choose to be a live-in nanny of sorts. So in the very beginning, when you're moving here, you choose a family and you have this agreement with them that yes, these are the number of hours I'll be going to university. The rest of the time I'll be at home. So that's a way you can cancel out their rents. And by being a live-in guest, you can also get to experience the culture, and like how does a French family work, how do they function as a whole, what are the mindsets, what are the spending methodologies. Like you can learn these things, so it's a cultural exposure as well. So in the end, everything is up to planning. Research, 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 plan, and stick to the plan.
So thank you, Apoorv, for bringing out one aspect on mental health, which we can cover in this episode. And I believe since it's a much larger aspect, we will still have to cover it in subsequent episodes in much greater detail, with maybe few psychologists in place. But it is not a point to be missed. And since we're talking of all these anxieties, all the differences and the biases that we are experiencing, and we are referring right now more into the higher education time period for a person, which means, you're freshly away from home. This is your first few years coming out of the comfort of your home and your family and your parents. The mental issues can play a big role, and I would want to know uh, how have three of you battled any anxieties or stresses that you have felt, any loneliness or the homesick feeling. How did you manage? Because it's not like a 2 hour bus journey to go back home, or a weekend trip back home. So how did you handle those stresses uh, over and above everything else which was boggling you down? And of course, you had to do a good performance outcome at your college. Let me start by Poornaditya first.
Yes, ma'am. So mental health issues, yes, and anxiety, loneliness that can attack you at whenever you don't want it to. When you move out, the first thing is that you leave very excited. Oh, wow, new country, amazing, nice experience. But once the excitement dies down, then the homesickness starts settling in. Then you start getting lonely because you are in a completely new place. You do not know anybody. You open the next door, everybody's a new face. Um, at least I had the privilege of being in an English speaking country. Um, if you go to some country that doesn't speak English, then you can't even talk to anybody properly because you're still trying to learn the language, still trying to get hold of the accent, the slangs, and everything. So that becomes really tough. And Murphy's law comes into picture. If something can go wrong, it will go wrong. There are a million things that can go wrong. Especially right now, it's a recession market with recession. Job hunting is just a complete headache. It is all next to impossible finding a job sometimes, and you will be applying for 50 jobs, not getting any call back. Just email starts with, unfortunately, we cannot give you this job, and that really takes a toll on you. In that case, I personally had the advantage of sharing a brain cell with two members of this panel, Juhi and Apoorv. This is an internal joke, but yeah, that helped a lot. And for that, I actually wanted to thank Sambada ma'am. Sambada ma'am made a group of us four people, and before that, we had no idea who we were. Like we just okay, yeah, we heard the name. Okay, we know this person exists, but interaction-wise, there was zero interaction, and we made a group, and it has been really fun. So whenever something goes wrong, we just come to the group, we do the trauma dumping, ranting, everything goes on, and one way or another, somebody finds a way to just like chill and just lift your mood up. So my suggestion would be find such people you can share your brain cell with, find people around you. You might not be able to make friends immediately when you land into a new place. Keep a hold of your old friends. And obviously, family. Dude, whenever something goes wrong, the first thing you'll cry for is, Mama, ye kharab hua. Just call your parents, rant it out. They might be stressed, you might be stressed, but has like a very soothing effect when you're able to cry your heart out. So yeah, just talk it out. Something goes wrong, you're feeling sad, you're feeling lonely, call your friends, call your family, talk to them. That's pretty much how I did it.
Mhm. Thank you. Bhanu?
So this topic is more like I would say it's not even for international students, it's for everyone in their life. And yeah, I mean the phase of coming to US and all those things are stressful. But then I would say, looking back, I would say I had like much more stressful periods in my job and other periods in my life. So I would say the two things. I mean, everyone has their own coping mechanism. For me personally, I would say because I'm giving encouraging young generation and everyone. So I would tell them two things. First is, and this is a quote that is being said by someone very big. I don't remember the name, but the quote is: "The quality of your life is directly proportional to the amount of stress you are able to handle successfully without whining or anything. The more you are comfortable and calm, a lot of this in a very a stressful environment, the more you're gonna be successful and better in life." So, I mean, yeah, I mean, that's bottom line. Like the stress is gonna be everywhere, no matter what you do, job, personal life, everywhere, and you just have to deal with it with the same mentality. The second, I would say, like that's something like a joke between me and my wife. Like, when you speak, like when you start whining about small things, Like you get stressed and you say, "Oh, this is not good. That is not good. That is not okay," and you start whining. So me and my wife like have a joke. Should I call a ambulance instead of ambulance of ambulance? There are things in life that are beyond your control. There's nothing you can do about it. It is gonna happen. Nothing you can do about it. So just be able to. You have to be mentally strong to be able to withstand it and not lose your mind.
Thank you. Juhi?
Yes. Growing up, I did mention that we were constantly shifting between countries. So it's something I'd especially observed with my parents. We never had a set community per se. Every 2 years, we're in a completely different country, completely different environment. Um, for me, change became a norm to the point that, well, they say that the brain doesn't differentiate between what is good and what is bad, but between what is comfortable and what is not. So when you meet a new situation, immediately alarms start blazing in your head, not because it's bad necessarily, but because your brain is not used to that situation. So I'd say change is inevitable. You get scared of change, that's normal. It's okay. But this too shall pass. End of the day, is the meter running or not? Yes. If it's running, you're able to sleep. Yes, that's a day well spent. Other than that, I'd say be kind to yourself. It's okay to feel lonely. It's only human to feel lonely. Humans are social creatures, and you're away from your home. Maybe for the first time, maybe not. I've been staying away from my parents since I was 18 years old. Gosh, that's 6 years already. But end of the day, there's always people you can fall back to. Like 2, 3 a.m. in the morning, I know that I'm messing up on an assignment. I just group call. Whoever is awake will pick the call. If they're not awake, I will wake them up because it's okay. I've been there with them when they're been facing stuff. So when I'm facing stuff as well, they're there for me. But also learn to enjoy your own company. Many people are constantly driven by the need to be surrounded by others, but invest in your hobbies. Invest in going out, just take walks in the nature, check for events that interest you. For example, I know that there is a music event going on. I will go, even if it's by myself, because those few hours I am forming a friendship with myself. Because it's okay. It's okay to take your time. It's okay to feel sad. It's okay to rely on people. Everyone has their own coping mechanism. But end of the day, this too shall pass, and you are gonna be growing as an adult. It's okay.
Thank you, Juhi. And before I hand it over to Apoorv, I'm also tempted to share something about this on from my personal experiences. So I remember very well the first time I went to the hostel, and it was my choice. No one put a gun on my head saying you have to go and live in the hostel. And it was just the third day, and I catch the train back home. And I remember my mother and father sitting in the veranda and my head on my mom's lap, and I'm crying. I don't want to do my master's. I'm not going back to IIT. Ho gaya shauk pura, whatever money you have put in, see if you can recover it. But this is it. I'm not going back. However, so of course, your parents give you the comfort you need at times when you're not able to do it yourself. But jokes apart, over the several years of my life, I've understood having few good friends, having people with whom you can talk without the fear of getting judged, uh, bringing a very close and honest relationship with one or two people particularly helps a lot. So you don't need a huge list of people who you follow or who follow you, but identify the right people with whom you have a wavelength match, the people who will always be there for you even if you're fighting head to head on little things, but these are the people who will come to rescue you. And one last thing, because I am way older than all of you here, I realized that my friendships which I made in college have lasted me till today. It's the friendships which I made in school and college when I was in my teens and in my 20s, which are the best, the most strongest. And I can survive another 30 years with those friendships. So while you're in college, Invest in social circle with your friends, because these are the friendships which will walk along with you. That's my last bit of advice. Over to you, Apoorv. I think we're done for this episode questions. Of course, we have a lot more to cover in future episodes, but let Apoorv round this up.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. I just wanted to quickly add about the topic as well. So, everybody brought up really good points. And one of the things that obviously it's debatable whether the value of what I'm going to say will be useful to the people who are listening. But basically, anytime, as ma'am said, anytime you feel, or even Poornaditya mentioned actually, that having a group is important. And I have like I as a kid was a bit of an outcast, right? And as Juhi mentioned, that she had to constantly change her circles, like probably much more than anybody would on an average scale. So the easiest way I found to like find people who would listen to me is just constantly involve myself in some activity. And like for example, I used to attend events in other colleges, uh, uh, not my own, because I knew the people there and I was tired of seeing the same faces. And it would help me personally because I would find some new person, I would connect with them, and I would be like, ha, yes, this particular thing we match on. And as ma'am mentioned, the same wavelength, which is what IUCWE did for me when I met uh, Juhi Poornaditya Fairy, who's not on this panel today. And when I met, these inspiring, fun mentors in the form of Sampada ma'am, Krishna Vedula sir. And it is always helpful to just reach out. And even if you feel you're an introvert, not feel, even if you are an introvert or an ambivert or an extrovert, whatever the case might be, things might be different. It's very subjective, it's a huge spectrum. But on by and large, the solution, as Juhi mentioned, as social creatures, by and large, the solution majority of the times is just talking to people. Communication, it's the key and answer to pretty much most of the problems. Now, coming to the rounding up of what we all talked about. So, obviously, when we talk about going for masters, so we have, luckily, thanks to Sampada ma'am and thanks to this platform, we have a spectrum of people who are on this master's program. You have people like me who want to go outside to study. You have people like Juhi who are currently studying. You have people like Poornaditya who just recently graduated, and then you have people like Bhanu who has been graduated for a while, and his experiences matter in terms of the long-term effects or the long-term struggles and what all that entails. So that is really fun and really helpful in terms of communication and discussion. Now, coming to the roundup, what we learned today, generally speaking, is that first and foremost, uh, going for masters entails you having to leave your comfort zone. It entails you having to look at different things, research about it. Now, Poornaditya mentioned an interesting topic or an interesting point, which is auditing lectures, uh, allowing you to kind of basically pick and choose which professors you feel like you understand better. It's not something that we see very commonly in India, and it's probably one of the most interesting aspects of overseas education. Another interesting point which we heard today was made by Juhi, which is source based or citation based, basically information dispenser. Information based dispensing, which is that people need to have some understanding of where they are getting the information they are getting. And that is something that o- on a certain scale, when we are in engineering, we are coming across all of this because we read textbooks which generally have a references section at the very end, where they have all of the information where it was picked up, but we don't consciously think about it. And as I've mentioned previously, I went to multiple events, and luckily for me, these events were paper presentations, were project presentations, or even HR and tech interview, mock HR and mock tech interviews, and that kind of helped me understand the importance of citations. Like, because when you speak, you need to back up what you are saying, and unless it is anecdotal, meaning coming from your own experience, unless it is anecdotal, it needs to be backed up. So that is a very important point. Next, which Aditya mentioned, which is that, the aspect of teams, which really is important in terms of when you are there. So the variety of people that are in your team, whether it is in college, whether it is in the university you are studying masters for, whether it is in your workplace, that really influences the way you think, which is also added on by Juhi's point about personality changes based on language. Um, Next, Bhanu mentioned something which I think is at the very core of all of this, which is the programming of your mind, whether it is based on language or just the place that you grew up in. And the way you think, the way you interact, the way you look at things, all of that is influenced and probably to a very large degree decided by where you grew up. And as Juhi also mentioned, which is open mindedness is a very important aspect of this, which is communication and open mindedness. You are welcoming to the different things that you've never experienced before, and also understanding that not everything is going to be the same. Next, another important aspect which we talked about is industrial experience. So, the what we understood today is that industrial experience does play a bit of a pivotal role, as Bhanu mentioned, that it does help you kind of get an understanding of what you are going into, and that really obviously helps you with understanding what you're getting into, as well as how you should be or how things are in a particular sense. Next, Bhanu mentioned something while talking about finance management, which I think is very important, which is that you need to have some basic life skills. So whether it is cooking, whether it is cleaning, all of that stuff, and if you don't have the time for that, then you need to find a way to make that possible. And all of this comes under, as Poornaditya mentioned, the savings aspect of it. And Juhi also mentioned every bit that you did not spend is money saved. So that is insanely important. Whatever you want to buy, put some money aside for it. It might sound like a very general statement, but saving saves lives in a certain sense. So definitely go for that. And something I actually would like to add as well, because that I felt like is a theme across all of these uh, talking points, which is that networking is an insanely important aspect. Because if you have a good network, you can find places to live, you can find people who can help share your burdens, you can find people who would help you get accustomed to the place you are in, and generally speaking, help you out in everything that you might feel like you cannot do alone, or whatever else might be the issue. So basic networking is very important, and no matter how you are socially, some amount of networking is always going to be a net positive. And finally, we spoke about mental health, which, as ma'am mentioned, we will have a separate episode about, with proper people who are, actually have degrees in this, and not just based on anecdotal experiences. But the aspect of mental health is something about leaving comfort zones, having coping mechanisms for issues that might come up. And all of this tends to come under the basic umbrella of, again, basic networking, having some life skills that help you sort out some of your issues, finding outlets, as Juhi mentioned, embrace your hobbies, go out, even if it means you're spending time alone with yourself. That is a very crucial aspect. So all of this is the general rundown of today's conversation. Now, when you guys, the listeners and the watchers, are going to be listening to this or watching this, you will obviously have a lot of questions. Maybe we spoke about something, maybe we didn't speak about something, and you have something that you want to point out, whether it is you're in a situation similar to this, you have something to add, whatever the case might be, you can definitely, contact us. So the easiest way to do that is to basically go on LinkedIn, look at our Stucratic FM page, or even go on the ICEE post that will be sharing the episode that you have anything to add to or ask about. And in the comment section, you can mention whoever it is that mentioned something you want an answer from, or just a general question to the IUCEE team and or the Stucratic team, and we will try to answer as much as we can. If the relevant people from the panel in that episode have anything they can add, they will add it from their own LinkedIn account. That will help with you increasing your network. And more importantly, this particular podcast is available everywhere. So if you are listening, you can find it on Spotify, you can find it on Apple Music, you can find it on YouTube Music. And if you are watching, then you can find it on YouTube. Now, the most important aspect of all of this is that this is for you guys, the watchers and the listeners. So definitely do go out, do maybe follow this, subscribe to this, whatever the case might be. Whatever you mention, whatever questions you might have, you can tag us on the various social media. We have one on Instagram, we are on LinkedIn, we are on YouTube,
Spotify.
basically Spotify, basically anywhere that we can be, we are trying to be there. So if you have something you would like to have discussed at some point in the future, shoot us a question, shoot us a topic, whatever the case might be. And finally, just remember, this is a safe place for everyone who is studying, has studied, or will study. And as Sampada ma'am always says, tune in to Stucratic FM when your life goes out of tune. Thank you for listening and watching.